Hi, this is Chuck Stull. I'd like to look at vertical elements of production. This is another factor that can make firms larger than they might be in a simple Econ 101 world. Many firms are at least partially vertically integrated, and we'd like to look at why that might be. Nearly every manufacturing process depends on a vertical chain of production. We start with raw materials that are mined, grown, cut, things like oil, cotton, wood, ores. Those are then processed into inputs. Things are synthesized. So we make plastics, thread, pulp, steel, parts and subsystems. Those then are assembled into products. This is our final stage of production, where we make pens, clothes, books, and cars. And then those are distributed through wholesalers, retailers, to the end user. And frequently we have transportation and warehousing between these different stages of production. I'd like you to consider blue jeans for a minute. Like many products, there's a variety of steps that go from raw materials to the final user. What I'd like you to do is to pause this video for a second and jot down all of the steps that you can think need to be taken for blue jeans to go from raw materials to the final consumer. All right, let me look at some of the steps that I thought of. Blue jeans start originally as cotton grown in a farm field. Those then need to be harvested, and the initial processing involves carding, combing, and cleaning. The cotton is then spun from cotton fibers into thread. The thread is woven into denim. Parts are then cut. Parts of the jeans are cut from the denim material. The denim is then sewn into the blue jeans, and those are then distributed to retailers, perhaps with some intermediate wholesale steps, and eventually purchased by the consumer. Now, if you are a blue jean manufacturer, you need to decide how many of these steps should be done by your own firm. This is the make or buy decision. Should you purchase denim or should you make it yourself? Should you spin thread or should you buy it? Should you grow cotton or purchase it on the open market? Should you distribute to stores or sell to a wholesaler or sell direct to consumers? Many industries are vertically integrated to some degree, meaning they do multiple stages on the chain of production. Now, vertical integration is an interesting aspect of market structure, since it implies that markets are not efficiently allocating resources. Economists generally believe that markets are desirable. Prices send important signals about scarcity, opportunity, cost, and value. Market competition provides discipline to control costs and adopt new technologies. Markets generally are efficient. Markets also avoid the cost of command and control systems. So many transactions do take place on markets, but vertical integration raises an important question: why do we avoid markets in some cases? Long-term contracts are an alternative to spot markets or alternatives to the instantaneous markets that we might normally think of. Here, a firm agrees to buy inputs from a particular supplier, and the present and future prices and quantities are frequently determined by a contract. Vertical integration is a third alternative, and here the firm produces the inputs itself. The quantities are determined internally, and prices may or may not be frequently used for decision making. There are some intermediate systems, what we might call tapered integration, where inputs are bought from a subsidiary and from outside. So here a firm might buy some components and might produce some of those same components from their own subsidiary, from a division within the company. We also have franchising, where we have, in many cases, like restaurants, gas stations, car dealers, where there is firms that are tied to a parent company, to the franchisor. So the restaurants use the franchised company's name. They follow the same procedures, but the businesses are independently owned. In Japan, there is a relatively complicated system, the keiretsu, which is designed through cross-shareholdings of a variety of different kinds of companies, setting up long-term informal relationships. These are not quite integrated, they are not quite independent, but they have been a very important part of Japanese market structure for a long time. In Korea, the similar conglomerate structure is the kaibol, where again you have cross holdings, and often in Korea, family control. So let me turn to this question of why would we want to avoid markets? Markets have many advantages. The market price reflects the current value of the input. Producers of inputs have a strong incentive to minimize costs, and producers of inputs can take advantage of any economies of scale that exist in their production process. And using spot markets makes it easy to switch suppliers. So what we're looking for are reasons why firms may choose not to take advantage of the markets. And one reason is that there may be a relationship-specific investment. In other words, the production of inputs may be more efficient if they're designed for one specific user. This is sometimes known as asset specificity. Right? Asset specificity is when equipment or machinery have lower value or perhaps no value at all if it is used for a different product. At least part of the investment is sunk. So we could look at physical asset specificity. If we consider dies to stamp auto body parts, there is little use for these for other cars. A door made for a Toyota will not fit on a Ford. Similarly, we can have boilers that are designed to burn a very specific grade and type of coal. These are very efficient, but they can't easily switch. There are parts of the investment that are sunk. We can also have site specificity. This looks at physical proximity. So if we look at steel, we can have a blast furnace and a steel-making furnace, and if you put them side by side where the metal stays hot, they're a huge saving. It's much, much more expensive to take a piece of metal, cool it down, transport it, and then reheat it up as it is to take it hot and move it from one stage to the other. This works fine as long as both plants operate continuously. If one closes, then the value of the other one can be lost, or most of the value can be lost. A third type of asset specificity are dedicated assets, right? Things that are made for a particular company. So if we consider investing in a process where there are only one or two buyers, we need to be very careful in terms of thinking about what is their long-term need. So if we're making a artificial sweetener like NutraSweet, nearly all of the volume of that is going to go to soft drink companies like Pepsi and Coke. If they stop purchasing it, my investment in NutraSweet production, right, would disappear. So asset specificity leads to a problem where firms can take advantage of each other. This is known as the holdup problem. If you have sunk money into equipment and machinery specific to another firm's needs, that firm can exploit your situation. They can say, oh, we want to renegotiate our contract. We want to pay you a lower price, and you have nowhere to turn. That gives them the power to exploit the situation. This is particularly important when timing is crucial. Now, the incentive to hold up the partner can be high because it can be very profitable either to extract rent from them or to get a lower price. But that means that the partner, right, is going to want to avoid making those asset-specific investments, right, which would be efficient. So trying to hide from the holdup problem can lead to inefficiencies in production. So one reason we might see long-term contracts or vertical integration is that these can be solutions to the holdup problem. Let me move to a very specific example. This looks at auto production in the early 1900s. Originally, General Motors and Fisher Body were separate companies. GM purchased car bodies on short-term contract. The bodies were made of wood, and so it was very easy to switch production from one style to another. A company like Fisher Body could easily transform its production process to make different models, makes, or even different manufacturings of cars. There wasn't very much specific investment. But that changed with the arrival of metal body construction. This required very large specific investment, and Fisher Body became at risk if they invested in the expensive dies that were needed to produce the parts for General Motors. They were at risk that General Motors could hold them up. So in 1919, General Motors and Fisher Body made a long-term agreement, 10-year agreement to supply parts. Fairly soon, that contract ran into problems because General Motors sales were higher than expected, and their needs then for more parts were higher than expected. And they wanted to renegotiate the contract to accommodate their current needs. They also had the idea to reduce shipping costs would be to locate the Fisher Body plant directly next to the GM assembly plant. This led to much higher risk to Fisher Body. If they were located directly in a GM plant, who else could they sell to? And so there was still that incentive for post-contractual opportunism. So General Motors went from short-term contracts with Fisher Body to long-term contracts, and then over the period 1924 to 1926, General Motors bought Fisher Body and made it a wholly owned subsidiary. It was completely vertically integrated. Vertical integration does have advantages and disadvantages. Vertical integration can be a way to avoid contract problems and to reduce transaction costs. It lets firms make relationship-specific investments, which increases the efficiency of production. The disadvantages is that without markets, the firms need to come up with alternative ways to manage information and to manage costs. And these can lead to many internal management issues. The subsidiaries may not respond to the incentives in the way that the parent company believes. There was a time when General Motors subsidiaries were producing lower quality parts than their independent suppliers because with the outside suppliers, General Motors could easily drop them if they were not meeting the quality standards. With the internal subsidiaries, they didn't have that same option. So, vertical integration provides a second explanation as to why we see large firms. Economies of scale say firms will be at an advantage if they are bigger. Vertical integration says firms may be even bigger by combining across stages of production. This is Chuck Stull, Kalamazoo College.